Hi everyone, this is my anthropology senior thesis titled Make Japan Great Again, an emerging class of transnational youths and their Yaritaikoto for social good. My actual thesis is almost 50 pages, so I can only cover so much, but to start us off, I want to ask, what do you want to do after college? For many of us, this must be a daunting yet overly familiar question. Last year, I was catching up over Zoom with my Japanese friend who also goes to American elite college. To this question, she answered, I still don't know for whom I want to make society better. Although this wasn't our first time discussing this topic, her comment struck me because right before this Zoom call, my dorm was going through some silly disputes among the residents. But I couldn't even speak a word during our communal meeting in order to address the situation. Juxtaposed with my bold vision about social good, I had to face my inability to fix such a trivial problem. During this Zoom call, I started questioning myself and my own values about what it means to do social good. This is how my project started. I view my thesis as a public anthropology project, specifically geared towards non-academics and the study abroad community in Japan. My study focuses on Yaritaikoto International Scholarship Program, which only started 6 years ago for the class of 21. I was fortunate enough to get admitted into its second cohort. This is an entirely merit-based scholarship that covers all costs of college attendance for 4 years. Although it does have a cap on household income, over 99% of Japanese people are technically eligible to apply. However, there are some requirements. First, you have to be admitted into a top school in either US or UK. And you also need a Japanese passport, some Japanese language skills, and willingness to contribute to the community of Yanai scholars. Above all, the foundation evaluates scholarship applicants based on their ability to use international insights and help develop Japanese society. As this promotion video shows, the program aims to support future leaders who want to make the world a better place. But why did Yanai start such a program? In order to understand this, we have to review the history of post-war Japan. After the World War II, especially in the 80s, Japan experienced an unprecedented economic boom. Since the 90s, however, the economy crashed suddenly due to these international events. And during this period, the national government aggressively implemented policies for deregulation and privatization. Since the initial crash in the 90s, Japan has endured 3 decades of stagnation. Academic anthropologists studied vulnerable populations in the recessionary Japan, but no one has really looked at how people with privilege responded to this alleged national crisis. And this is where my study on transnational elites comes in. First, elite adults started promoting study abroad in the early 2010s. Both the public and private organizations launched merit-based scholarship programs for study abroad with the similar narrative of national revitalization. Moreover, many business leaders published books on transnational higher education in which they mentioned the national stagnation as one of the major reasons why young people should go abroad. Elite students, on the other hand, view study abroad as just another option to pursue personal aspirations. In fact, many Japanese international students started their own nonprofits to support Japanese high school students with the college admission process abroad. In doing so, they all caution against studying abroad for the sake of prestige or popularity. Instead, they emphasize the importance of reflecting on oneself and pursuing one's Yaritaikoto. This Yaritaikoto literally means what one wants to do. As its translation suggests, the meaning of this term heavily depends on specific contexts. But in Japanese discourses, people often use Yaritaikoto as a synonym for curiosity, passion, and aspiration, especially throughout the Yanai admission process. Long story short, I wanted to know what it means to social good and how other Yanai scholars are finding and pursuing Yaritaikoto. To answer these questions, I collected data from 4 years of my own experiences as a Yanai scholar and Tadashi Yanai's autobiographies, the scholarship's official website, and 27 interviews over Zoom. I used pseudonyms that my informants selected for themselves. When I started analyzing my data, soon I realized that the foundation has no freaking definition of social good. On the website, Yanai himself explains that there are many challenges, but no single solution. And we have as many solutions as the number of individual perspectives. During my interviews, I went after this vagueness. Yet again, all of the administrators emphasized that as long as you're doing something for someone to some degree at some point in your life, that is social good. So I started paying attention to this vagueness itself. Eventually, I found that the development of Japanese society means revitalization of Japan's global reputation, rather than necessarily addressing issues regarding Japan. As this course shows, Yanai scholars doing anything as Japanese identifying individuals somehow counts as a contribution to their country. So in theory, me just existing in this room and giving this presentation is already helping Japan. Given the broad definition of social good, the foundation avoids providing any sort of intervention or guidance about scholars' education and career goals. Here, Mr. Nara says, the foundation is not asking for anything. It is up to scholars to figure out what to do. The foundation's refusal to offer institutional interventions coincides with its focus on individual effort for pursuing Yaritaikoto that results in social good. When I asked Mr. Sato why some scholars managed to combine their Yaritaikoto and social good, he attributed their success to resilient action taking. He also stressed the importance of being relaxed and chill, as opposed to overworking oneself. Similarly, at the bottom, Mr. Jackson encouraged scholars to reflect on their own original motivations so that they don't lose their purpose while facing ups and downs during college. Throughout my interviews, I witnessed these administrators and Yanai's genuine expressions that they want to help society through this program. However, as anthropologists focus on behavioral impacts over psychological intentions, I unapologetically put their good intentions aside and examined students' lived experiences and reported impacts. First and foremost, administrators' individualized advice fails to recognize societal challenges that most scholars cannot easily overcome. For example, many scholars claim that these struggles ultimately stemmed from their socialization through the education systems in Japan and the US, family and peer pressure, or institutional policies that make it difficult to secure a desirable job. A few students, like Erin, directly criticized the foundation's lack of guidance by saying they're just letting these privileged elites run wild. The discrepancy between the foundation's individualized advice and scholars' societal struggles reflect what social scientists call practice theory. This theory argues that seemingly individual actions are always already shaped by social, cultural, and linguistic factors. Thus, supposedly transformative actions, such as the complete freedom that Yanai Foundation grants to its scholars, often reproduce or exacerbate the status quo. Despite the scholars' struggles, the Foundation's vague definition of social good makes any critique about the program irrelevant. In this quote, Mr. Jackson explains that because social change takes such a long time, we shouldn't judge the program based on outcomes that are available today. When describing what the program's ultimate success would look like, administrators and students both use the analogy of long-term investment. This investment framework illustrates two important points. First, one can never predict long-term performance with 100% accuracy. And two, the program as a whole will be considered successful even if just a small number of scholars achieve significant results. The vagueness of social good and investment analogy function as what linguistic anthropologists call perspective erasure. Erasure is defined as a process in which dominant ideology makes inconvenient facts invisible. As a form of prospective erasure, the Foundation's approach to social good deflects any criticism about the program simply as irrelevant. I started this project partially because I myself wanted to understand how to do social good. However, the more I dug into my own scholarship program, the more I realized that each one of us is responsible for figuring out what social good means and how to achieve it. So doing this research forced me to really rethink for whom and how I want to make society better. At least for me, social good certainly doesn't mean elite kids doing whatever they want with excessive resources. Instead, I define it as critically choosing everyday actions towards systemic alleviation of inequity. My version of social good doesn't suddenly start at some point in our lives. Rather, it starts right here, right now. With that in mind, I'll conclude my presentation by asking, what will you do for your own version of social good? Thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and I want to acknowledge the Yaritaikoto Foundation's generous funding that made my higher education possible, and all of my fellow Yanai scholars and administrators who contributed to my research. Thank you so much.